I never imagined I'd end up on the HOA president's hit list, but here I am. My name is Daniel, and I've lived in Oakwood Estates for about 3 years. On the surface, it's your typical suburban neighborhood. Neatly trimmed lawns, nearly identical houses, an HOA that runs a place like a boot camp. At the head of it all, Karen Wilkins, a woman in her mid-50s who looks like she's been waiting her whole life to speak to someone's manager. That tight blonde bob and constant scowl? Iconic. When I first moved in, I tried to stay under the radar. I read the HOA manual front to back, planted the exact type of petunias listed in the landscaping guidelines, and even repainted my mailbox to match the approved shade of Oakwood beige. But apparently, none of that was enough for Karen. She had a knack for finding violations that weren't even in the rule book. It started with petty things. A passive-aggressive note about my trash bin being visible for 20 minutes too long on pickup day. Then came the official warning about my grass being a 1/4 inch taller than allowed. A 1/4 inch. But things got truly weird last week. I came home from work and immediately sensed something was off. I stood on my porch for a minute, trying to figure it out. Then it hit me. My house numbers had been changed. Gone were the sleek, modern 518 digits I had installed when I moved in. In their place were clunky, outdated brass numbers reading 8155. Someone had literally rearranged my address. I was stunned. Who would do that? And why? As I stared at the altered numbers in disbelief, I heard the unmistakable sound of someone clearing their throat behind me. I turned, and there she was. Karen stood on my lawn with her arms crossed, and that smug little grin she wore whenever she thought she had someone cornered. "I see you noticed the update," she said with a tone that oozed satisfaction. "Your modern house numbers weren't in compliance with the HOA's aesthetic guidelines, Section 12, Paragraph 4. To be exact, all numbers must be traditional in style and between 4 and 6 inches tall. Yours were too contemporary." I took a breath, try and keep my cool. "Karen, I double-checked the guidelines before I installed those. There was nothing about house number styles back then." Without missing a beat, she pulled a laminated booklet from her designer handbag, her so-called Bible. "Maybe you should review the updated version. The board voted on it last month." She flipped it open and pointed to a highlighted section with a perfectly manicured finger. But something was off. The document was dated just last week, not last month, and the font in the updated house number section didn't match the rest of the text. "I never got any notice about this," I said calmly. "And even if I had, you can't just trespass on my property and change things without permission. That's illegal." Karen flushed slightly, but stood her ground. "As HOA president, I have the authority to correct violations when necessary. It's in the bylaws." "Then show me exactly where it says you're allowed to step onto someone's private property and physically alter their home," I said, voice even but firm. She bristled. "I don't have time to educate you on HOA protocols. The numbers are now in compliance." End the discussion. She turned on her heel and stormed off, those designer heels clicking like gunshots down the sidewalk. "Karen, one more thing," I called after her. "Karen, did you realize that tampering with someone's address numbers is actually illegal?" I said it calmly, but my tone was firm. They're not just for decoration. Emergency responders rely on those. Without even turning around, she flicked her hand in the air like she was swatting a fly. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Daniel. It's just numbers." What Karen didn't know, what she definitely didn't expect, was that I work as a municipal code enforcement officer in the next city over. Zoning laws, permit violations, property codes, address regulations, that's my daily territory. So I knew right away she had crossed a serious line. After she flounced off, I went inside, pulled up the official HOA guidelines from a community portal, and confirmed exactly what I suspected. Nothing in the rule book said anything about the style of house numbers. The only requirement was that they be visible from the street and at least 4 inches tall. Karen had completely fabricated a violation. Worse, she had forged a fake document and passed it off as an HOA update. She didn't just bend the rules, she broke them. The next morning, I restored my original address numbers and quietly installed a small security camera aimed at my porch. Something told me this wasn't over. And I was right. That evening, the camera caught Karen creeping up my walkway, screwdriver in hand, again. She was trying to reinstall the same ugly brass numbers she had forced onto my home before. That was the final straw. I gathered my evidence. Screenshots from the security footage, the real HOA guidelines, and printed municipal codes highlighting that tampering with residential address signage is a crime. Then, I composed professionally worded, but very clear, email addressed to the full HOA board. I outlined a timeline, detailed her actions, and emphasized the safety hazard. And yes, I made sure to CC Karen. The next morning, I was outside trimming some hedges when I saw a familiar silhouette power walking toward my property. Karen, phone clutched in one hand, eyes blazing with fury, was a vision of rage. Several neighbors discreetly paused their weekend chores to watch the show. "How dare you send that slanderous email to the entire board?" she snapped, not even trying to hide her anger. "You made me look like a criminal." I calmly set down my garden shears. "I didn't slander you, Karen. I reported a fact. You trespassed and tampered with something you had no right to touch. And I have it all on camera." Her face turned redder than her lipstick. "I am the HOA president," she screamed, her voice climbing to a decibel I'm sure could shatter glass. "I have the right to enforce compliance in this neighborhood." By now, a small audience had gathered, neighbors raking non-existent leaves, watering already soaked plants, just happening to be outside. They were listening and watching. "Being HOA president doesn't give you the right to break the law," I said, my voice calm but carrying. "You don't have the authority to come onto someone's private property and alter their home without consent. And if emergency responders can't find my house because the address is wrong, that's a public safety issue. Someone could die." "Oh, please," she snapped, rolling her eyes so hard I thought she'd sprained something. "It's just numbers. Stop being so dramatic." A voice cut through the air behind her. "It's not nothing." Karen and I both turned to see Mr. Jenkins, a retired firefighter, walking over from 2 houses down. "He's right, Karen," he said, arms crossed, expression grim. "We're trained to spot house numbers fast. If those numbers are wrong or hard to read, we waste time. And in an emergency, seconds matter. For the record," Bill said firmly, "we're given exact house numbers during emergency calls. If those are wrong, it can cost lives." Karen's eyes narrowed at the unexpected pushback. "This doesn't concern you, Bill," she snapped. But before he could answer, another voice chimed in. "Actually, it concerns all of us." Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street had joined the growing crowd. "If you're stepping onto private property and changing things without permission, that's not just inappropriate. It's dangerous." "Who's next?" Karen's expression began to crumble. The control she clung to was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. This is absurd," she stammered. "I was acting in my official capacity as HOA president to maintain neighborhood standards." I stayed calm, despite the rising tension. "Then show us. Show us exactly where in the bylaws it says you have the right to enter someone's property and change their home without their consent." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. She was caught, and she knew it. Suddenly, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Out stepped Ted Mitchell, the HOA vice president. Karen's face lit up, clearly expecting him to back her up. "Ted, perfect timing," she called out. "Daniel here is spreading false accusations. All I did was enforce the HOA standards." Ted looked anything but supportive. If anything, he looked uncomfortable. "Actually, Karen, that's why I'm here," he said, voice tight. "We've called an emergency board meeting this afternoon. The board has some serious concerns about your behavior." Karen blinked. "What concerns?" Ted hesitated, then said, "After Daniel's email, several residents came forward with similar complaints. You've been entering their property without permission, and some of the violations you cited, they don't even exist in the official guidelines." Her smile vanished. "You're siding with him? I've devoted 3 years to this neighborhood." "It's not about sides, Karen," Ted replied. "It's about staying within our legal authority." And what Daniel reported addressed tampering. It isn't just a policy issue. It's a legal one. The HOA could be held liable. This is insane. Karen shrieked. He's blowing this way out of proportion. It's just house numbers. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I filed a police report this morning. Tampering with address identifiers is a misdemeanor in this county, and the officer was very interested in my security footage. As if on cue, a police cruiser rounded the corner and slowed to stop in front of my house. Karen's face drained of color. You called the police? She whispered, her voice small now. Over house numbers? Over trespassing and interfering with safety infrastructure. I corrected her. House numbers are critical for emergency responders. The officer stepped out and walked over. Is there Karen Wilkins here? He asked. Karen raised her hand weakly, her posture shrinking by the second. Ma'am, the officer said politely, I need to speak with you regarding a complaint about property tampering and interference with emergency identification markers. We have video evidence showing you altering address numbers without the homeowner's permission. I'm the HOA president, she sputtered. I was just enforcing standards. The officer nodded. I understand, ma'am, but HOA authority doesn't override municipal code. I'll need you to come with me to the station to answer a few questions. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Gone was the smugness, the confidence, the authority. She stood frozen as the officer explained that she was facing a misdemeanor charge, a possible fine of up to $1,000, and potential civil liability if her actions caused any delay in emergency response. I was just trying to maintain neighborhood standards, she whispered, voice cracking. The officer gently guided her toward the cruiser, and as the door shut behind her, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of justice. Not revenge, just balance. She'd pushed too far, and for once, the rules she clung to so tightly had finally turned against her.